There should be some chairs over that way, some chairs still around the tables, but find some place to be comfortable, and if standing is what you need to do, then you can do that. Some of us don't want to stand the whole time. There we go. All right. So I'm going to begin with a little bit of formality, so I'll ask you to turn off your cell phones or set them to stun, whatever it is you need to do. And I'm going to ask John Parker to come forward and give a speech, a toast to the church, as we traditionally do at Olivet. Thanks.
Wherever and whenever it is found, and under whatever circumstances there may be, and religious denominations that may operate, the Lord's universal church is for all men and women of good will, who follow His command to love and care for the neighbor as themselves. The church calls that kind of love the doctrine of charity, and that is how people express their love of God with care and concern for their neighbor. Getting to know Tom in the 1950s, and of course you know Tom has a couple of years on me. Getting to know Tom in the 1950s through working with him in the church's men's organization and during the planning and construction of this building in 1958, and in countless conversations over the years since, I learned that Tom really cared for those values in his life. It is for teaching those values to us all that we express our thanks for the Lord's Universal Church. Thank you.
And I have on deck Charles Bradfield, otherwise known as Charlie, I think, to everybody. I don't know.
Hello there. Hey. So nice to see so many people here, my dad and our family. And for those who don't know me, I'm Charlie Bradfield. I am the son, the only son, between two daughters. When I was younger, my dad made it very clear to me, you do not hit girls. And I said, okay, well, whatever. And then it dawned on me, my sisters were girls. Wait a minute, that's not fair. And what wasn't fair about it is that he didn't pass the same message on to my sisters about hitting boys. I was a boy. My dad was a fairly strict and father. We did not always get along, which is pretty normal for kids and parents. We did butt heads a few times. And so when I was 17 and I quit school, I figured I was going to get in some real trouble here. But he didn't do that. He came to me, he said, okay, you quit school. It's not for everybody. You got to get a job. I said, okay, you have 2 weeks. I go, what do you mean 2 weeks? What happens in 2 weeks? If you don't have a job, you need to move out. So I'm being 17 and a dumb kid going, my dad's never kicking me out. He wouldn't dare do that. 2 weeks comes up. You have a job? No. Guess what my dad did? See ya, Charlie. And I was gone. At first, I was pretty annoyed and upset about it. Because I said, how could you do that? You're supposed to love me. After a little while of time, I realized it was the hardest thing he's ever done. And my mom too, of course. After a little more time, I realized it was the best thing he could have done for me. Because he did love me. I was lazy. I needed a good kick in the butt. That was a pretty stiff kick. So my dad does love me. And I would come over afterward, after my mom passed away, and I would sit with him and watch a hockey game or a baseball game, or just have a beer with him. Discuss anything I wanted to. Not always agree with what he said, but I wanted an opinion from someone who was smarter than me. So I will miss my dad. I will miss him very much, but I'm also extremely happy for him. He has a strong body and a strong mind. He was reunited with his wife of almost 30 years ago. She passed away. brother, parents, and other friends and family that left before him. And I have no doubt in my mind that my grandmother, his mother-in-law, Laura Bellinger, standing there with an old-fashioned in her hand, with a bridge table set up, and a rather annoying voice, "What took you so long?" I love you, Dad. Happy birthday.
I'd like to offer the opportunity to those annoying sisters to hit back at Charlie for what he said. So Claire's on her way. Okay, here she comes. That's what we heard. Yeah. No pressure. And we're not looking in any particular direction at anybody else. Okay. I'll stand here with you if you want.
My brother spoke so well. It's a hard act to follow. I don't really have a lot to say. For those of you who know me and my relationship with my father, he was much more than a father. Of course, we had our rocky times and our disagreements, but he was like confidant. I could tell him anything, especially as he got older. His mellowness, he was so accepting of so many. He was my financial advisor. He was my best friend. I remember one morning, I woke up to the phone ringing and it was Charlie. He said, "You just waking up? It's 10 o'clock. I said, "Yeah, I know, it's sort of up late last night." And he said, "Well, what were you doing?" I said, "Talking." "With Dad?" "Yeah." "How long?" "I don't know, 4 or 6 hours." We just always had so much to talk about because he was always so interested in so much of life in the world. And there are so many people here. I know that some of you are, who is here from Meals on Wheels? Is there anybody here from Meals on Wheels? You know, yeah, Uncle Bob too. My father, it was so important to be useful. That was his number one. And when he had to give up his last day doing Meals on Wheels during this past summer as a driver, he had to give it up. He kept his card because he said, "Well, maybe I'll feel better again in a few months and be able to get back to it." But that really depressed him, that he had to stop doing something for our society. Anyway, miss you, Dad, but I have to let you go. Happy birthday.
She does. She handles pressure well. I want to make sure I don't miss some of the more close relatives. I think Ann's sort of saying, "I don't think so." And I don't know where'd Christy go? Oh, here's another relative. Hey, Jill.
I'm reading a letter that Christy wrote.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Jill Jorgensen. I'm a close friend of Ann's in particular, and of Christy's, and the family. Dear Grandpa, I've tried to write this letter a few times, unsuccessfully, clearly. I keep writing myself in circles, so here is what I remember. After Grandma passed, you cooked and I wrote the menu. Then you checked my spelling and corrected me. I'm sure you didn't eat a warm meal any of those many times. Sorry about that. Spelling is still not my strong suit, but thank you for trying. I ate your chips and drank your pop, Coke all the time. As an adult, I realize how crappy that must have been to come home to. You took me to the X when I was 12, and Mom said you might want to see the historical stuff and not the rides. But we walked through the gates with tickets, and you wanted to go on the biggest roller coaster. You looked like a clean-cut, slightly disheveled dumpster diver after, complete with a smoke bent in half from being in your chest pocket on the roller coaster. But you also looked very happy. You paid for my education. You literally put food in my mouth with that. To this day, I can still fall back on that. Thank you. I thought I should call you hundreds of times, But life came and went, and time zones took my chances a lot of times. Here's what I wish. I wish I had been able to come to see you at Christmas this year. I wish I had made that a priority. I wish you could live forever, but that's actually really selfish. So here's the last bit. I know you miss Grandma. She's waiting for you. She's close. She has been for weeks. I love you. I will miss you. I'm sorry I wasn't around enough or called enough. Not just for you, but for me. I know you don't like to hear it so much or too often because it loses its meaning, but one more time, for your ears and eyes only, I love you, I miss you, and will miss you. Tell Grandma I love her, and I still remember the taste of her lamb and the smell of her perfume. I will remember you always, likely by the smell of your cologne and cheese whiz on cauliflower. Brilliant, by the way. Tell Uncle Pete his popcorn maker is undefeated in distance. Love, Christy.
I know there are other people who would like to speak. I would invite you to come forward. I can also bring the microphone over. There we go. Hey, Ron, why am I surprised?
People know they've all had your cry. I'm going to tell you the real story of Tom. I first really met Tom when we were both working on King Street, about a block apart. And I don't know whether he's at his dad's office or an office close to his dad's, but he said, come over here, I want to see you for a minute. I got over there, and he said, take a look at this. I said, what is that? He said, it's a pen. What do you mean a pen? You never had a pen like that in 1949? Yes, we did, and the guy in my office here is selling them, and he wants us to go into business on our own, and we'd make $1 a piece on these things. Yeah, how did you know that 15, 20 years later, they'd be selling for $1 or less and given away? Anyway, that's when I first met Tom. The second time I met Tom was a little different because we were both married at a great deal different time zone. I was married in October, he was married in July. I mean, that's a terrible great distance between the two of us. Anyway, we made an agreement on a Friday night that we would meet on Saturday morning, and I would take him for a ride in the car that I had, and he would get up with us with Jean, and we'd go together in the car up to Georgian Bay. Well, you know the story. Anyway, I got to, and I said, we'll meet exactly at 8:30, because it's going to take a couple of hours to get up there. Okay, so at 8:30, I'm at his place, and Elaine is at the front door, and I'm at the side door, and nothing's happening. So I look inside the window, and there they are, both in bed, asleep, sound asleep. So I thought, this is a nice way to live. I opened the window, crawled in the window, not a sound from them. I went to the front door and let Elaine in. I said, I think we're going to have to cook breakfast for you. And we did. It knotted us pretty close together. Let me tell you a couple more stories. I won't say what happened to the breakfast part of it, but we never did get away. We started to drink about 9:30. The next time I met Tom was, come on, Ron, remember. It had to do, don't forget it, honey. It had to do with liquor again. The one thing I do remember is last year, or was it 2 years ago? I decided I'd give a little talk about his 90th birthday to him. So he was down at the end of this room getting food, and I was up here with a microphone. Uh-oh.
You guys have been here before.
So I said, Tom, we're going to, and our dear minister said, he's talking to you, Tom. And nobody heard me. He didn't hear me a thing I was saying. And I went on for about 15 minutes. I give one-liners about Tom. And then at the end I said, Tom, I got a bottle of gin for you. And suddenly his voice was so loud and clear, and he turned around and looked at me and said, hey, that's great. And he came over to the table. And Charlie got the bottle of gin and said, you're not having this till we get home. Anyway, there's three things. What else was the other thing? There's one other story I wanted to tell you. And if I think about it before I go home, I'll let you know. Anyway, Tom was a great scout. And he was a guy to remember for so many things. We used to love martinis together. And you know,
In my memorial address, that a lot of people are mentioned along in the pages of New Church Life. In those early years, they wrote into the magazine with news from various points around the church, and I'm not sure who the reporter was, but Toronto Society got a lot of really full reports. As I mentioned, the wedding is several paragraphs long, explaining what Tom and Jean's wedding looked like and how wonderful it was. But through those years, Ron has mentioned a number of times, and so is Robert Anderson, Bob Anderson. Do you remember the boiler, the pot boilers, Robert, or the pot boilers? They were some sort of crew you guys were involved with, put on a play back in '49. I know it's a long time ago, right? Yeah, so I'll forgive you for not remembering. I only know about it because I read the pages of New Church Life. I'm rambling on because I'm waiting for somebody else to come forward who'd like to speak. Okay, Jim Swan, please.
Uncle Ron here. I haven't called Uncle Ron in about 30 years. Seeing these two characters here, yeah, listen, Bob. I know you've had a birthday too. I consciously known Thomas Malcolm Bradfield since about 1954. I remember coming down Jameson Avenue with that lady there and her brother Ted, and Claire was probably 2 and I was probably 5. And my Aunt Marion, who some of you may remember, and Jean and Claire Walder were best of buddies, as well as Bunny Bevan back in the day, in the late 40s. And that progressed when people started to have kids, like this guy, Mike Smith, myself, Claire, a couple others. And around 199 Berry Road in 1954, there was one building that Ronald Lane, Bob and Betty were downstairs, we were upstairs, my grandmother and my aunt were on the main floor. And Smith was talking about the booze. Well, yeah, it was well oiled, and of course Gene and Tom were very much part of that. Aunt Jean told me a story once that Tom and she were the first people that my folks told when they got married. In fact, they didn't get married in the Elm Grove Church, they got married at Islington United. They decided on a whim to get married. And they came over, according to Aunt Jean, it was, there had been a party. It was probably the Smiths and the Andersons and the Bradfields having too many martinis or whatever the night before. And about 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, bang, 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 bang on the door, and Tom was never particularly excited about getting up in the morning. Those of you who knew him well would know. Anyway, he goes to the door, and, oh, Swan, what do you want? We got married! You know, so they're all happy, and Aunt Jean comes from the says from the other room, "That's a real knee slapper." So anyway, we've been associated for a long time, and it's good to be able to hear some laughter. And Gene and Tom are together, and that's pretty terrific. Anyway, that's all from me. Thanks.
I'm Patrick Horgan, part of this church, and I know Tom for a lot of years, and Jean and their family. As some of you know, I hate talking. Anyway, I just wanted to share a few things about Tom that weren't mentioned that are part of his life and his attitude and stuff. This tie, for example, is a maple leaf tartan, which doesn't match my outfit. It's worn because of his very Canadianness. I mean, those are the guys who built this country, did the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Depression, the war, just got out and made things happen. And in that regard, I don't think he was, I mean, Charlie could perhaps correct me, but I don't think he was ever afraid of anything. I mean, this was a guy who, during World War II, which a lot of people lost their lives, he was in the Navy on shore patrol in Toronto, so he was military police. So when the sailors would have shore leave, and they'd come home and they'd rip up the town and get in fights with other people whose girlfriends they were trying to hit up, Tom was the guy who'd come around and settle them down, the military police. Well, he felt like he was missing out, and it was a little too boring. So he went to the Navy officials and said, "Would you give me permission to, have a, whatever it's called, sabbatical from the Navy so I can join the Merchant Marine?" And for those of you who don't know, those were the unarmed ships crossing the Atlantic with supplies to keep Europe going that were sitting ducks for the German submarines. So he purposely went to the most dangerous part where you're unarmed and can't shoot back because he's afraid he'd miss out on some of the action. I mean, that's a different kind of guy. And he, in some of his business adventures, maybe some of you who worked with him can talk about that, but as a young adult trying to find my way, he got me a job at one of the companies he worked at, an electronics parts wholesaler. And this was back before the days of chips. And I used to get a ride with him every day to and from, and he smoked back then, and he had his cigarette, and he'd see how long he could get the ash before he had to tip it out in the ashtray. It was just one of those things about him, and he was always calm. It didn't matter what the traffic was like on the 401 or what happened at work. He just, okay, well, let's deal with it this way or that way. And then much later in life, let's say maybe 10 years ago, Ron might remember, my wife Mary and I were living in Georgetown, so we're sort of a little more farther away from the rest of the gang here. And, I don't watch a lot of sports, but I like to watch the Super Bowl. And Ron and his wife Elaine were living up in Caledon, not too far from us, so we're sort of the two orphans. So I said to Ron, "Are you going to watch the game?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, would you mind if I made some chili and came up and Mary and I will join you?" And he said, "Oh, sure, that'd be great."
Bring the gin.
Yeah, well, Ron had the gin covered. We brought some wine. But anyway, so I get up there, and of course, he's invited Bob and Tom, because they're what we used to call the three amigos, always hanging out together. And so it became an annual tradition where I would make the chili and we'd get together and they'd bring their cocktails and they'd bed and I'd drive them so they didn't have to worry about drinking and driving. And it was just a lot of fun. I think last year we didn't do it, and maybe the year before. We sort of ran out of venues because these guys all sold their homes and stuff like that. But they used to always lay bets and have 2 or 3 cocktails, nothing shy there. It's the old story, if I knew I would have lived this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Anyway, just wanted to share some of those things.
I see unless somebody else comes forward quickly, Ron says he's got one more story. No, Ron, we love your stories.
Now, there are children here.
Oh, I do. This is that kind of stuff. Anyway, as I said, I was married in October. He was married in July. He's a long time married before me. Anyway, I bought a car, and it was a little English car, and it was taller than it was wider, and I forget the name of it. But anyway, it was kind of an house. Anyway, we were invited to a party, a male stag on Jameson Avenue. Was it 79 Jameson? Is that the address? Yes. 79. Yeah. Beautiful. So we got to the party, and suddenly Tom says, "Would you mind taking Ron downstairs and the fire? You're starting the fire down there, and we'll come get the barbecue up later." So they took me downstairs. When I came back upstairs, they had taken the car and lifted it up onto the balcony of the 79 Westfield Vista. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, "What am I going to do with that?" They go, "You're going to take it down." Fred Longstaff, Senator Frank Longstaff, Ivan Scott, Bruce Scott, and there were about 4 others. They all took the car and lifted it down the stairs. Here it is. I couldn't believe it, but that's one of my stories about Tom. Behind all this, just standing there laughing like heck. Okay.
Good one, Dad.
Do we have any other people who would like to share a few words, memories?
I want to know when he started calling me Jay Burger. Where did the burger come
How many people got referred to by Uncle Tom as something burger? 1, 2, 3. Okay, you're 4, 5. There's a group of you. I think Tom Burger would say burger
It's more
too.
group than I thought.
Yeah. There's a bunch of you. You thought you were unique, but yeah.
How many people were asked, how many spots do you have on your belly?
Is that a common thing? No. Okay. I think Tom made stuff up as he went along. That's what I found about him. I was blessed to be able to visit with him in the hospital a few days before he passed. I was actually surprised that he passed as quickly after that visit, because he was very lucid and told me the story of when he took Jean to visit his parents for the first time. Quite a wonderful story. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was lovely to have him reminisce about his own life to me a little bit, because I did know Jean briefly when I came here as an assistant pastor. She passed away just as we arrived, right, Glenda? And I got to do the interment service for her. So it's been a long time since they've been apart, so we're really happy about them being reunited. Scanning as I continue to look for anybody else who'd like to say a few words. And if not, we will close down this part of the program and we'll let you just communicate with one another and visit. All the best, Tom.
Could we sing either happy birthday or here's to our friend?
Tom, I believe, would be 92 tomorrow or 93? Today. The family kept saying that to me and I keep forgetting. I'm so sorry.
Same birthday as the Queen.
Exactly. What? Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tom. Happy birthday to you and many more in the other world.